Hello, Mr. Starbuck. It's been a few weeks since we released our discussion, and so I think, well, I know it's time for an update for a variety of reasons. I think maybe you could start, though, by just bringing to the mind of the people who are listening just exactly what it is that you're up to.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. It was an incredible podcast, by the way. I feel like you have one of the best formats there is out there for really learning a lot about what people are doing. But update wise, I think since we last spoke, I'm trying to remember the exact week we shot, but I think since then, in our project to eliminate DEI in corporate America, we've continued to take down some pretty big companies. I think our biggest ones yet. So for those who are unfamiliar, didn't watch the last episode. Since about June of last year, I've been identifying companies one by one, going through their DEI policies, all their woke policies, and really exposing it to the public so that the public can make informed decisions about where they spend their money. Because as a consumer and a father myself, I didn't want to give my money to companies that hate me and my values and the people that I love. So the project has been overwhelmingly successful. I think most recently, since we spoke, some big highlights were that we got Toyota to change their policies. We got Walmart. That was massive. Walmart was a seismic shift in corporate America that I think is going to continue to bear fruit. McDonald's was another one we worked on very hard, and that was very, very recent here. And, I think one by one, each one of these companies add up and it changes sort of the trajectory of how people think about it. And it led up to this week. This week, I think, had one of the most unexpected wins, which was that Target changed their policies. Target was sort of a risk for us to even reach out to because they've been so dedicated to left-wing policy for so long. Nobody thought they would ever change. But I think the financial argument, the legal argument is one that has finally gotten to them. And I think the legal argument is so strong that many companies are now recognizing that they have serious liability here that could crush their companies in very damaging ways. And I think, frankly, any executive that is worth their salt in terms of understanding their duty, especially for a public company, you have that fiduciary duty to shareholders, right? And so they're starting to understand we need to recognize these liabilities and take some kind of action. Now, they're not all perfect. Some of these companies do really dramatic shifts that are, I call it the full Tractor Supply, right? Because that was the first company we did it with, and Tractor Supply went all the way. Some of them do that. Some of them make marginal changes to get out of legal liabilities, but they're changes that, while I call them marginal, they're very important to the people who work there. They're very important to merit being, sort of front and center in terms of hiring and firing in America. So it's still a massive shift and a big change. And even a group like Target, did I get everything I wanted? No, but I got probably 80% of what I wanted. They're no longer going to sell sexualized items to kids. They're not going to market pride material to kids anymore. I think, that along with the DEI changes and ending those goals, it makes a real difference in the long term to shifting us to some semblance of normalcy. And I think another thing that's given a lot of credibility with executives about what we're doing is that after the election, I think quite a few of them expected me to become maybe more ego driven, maybe to drive my own politics into companies and to force them to believe what I believe. And I think them seeing that I've stuck to the same request, and it's corporate neutrality. We want a healthy country, a healthy, really world where everybody can be able to go and shop and not feel like they're being indoctrinated. Everybody can go work at their job and not feel like they have diametrically opposed political values shoved down their throat every day. I think that brings us back to some semblance of normalcy and sanity. And I think that's healthy for a country, whether I disagree with my fellow employer or not. I don't really think it's a discussion for the workplace. And I think us sticking to that has moved a lot of people in boardrooms to see that we're serious and we really just want to get back to sanity. I think is the easiest way to explain it.
Yeah, well, it certainly wasn't my experience growing up that shopping was a political nightmare. Those two realms never really collided, and corporations wisely determined to make their commercial experience a zone of neutrality, insofar as that was commensurate with actually having a company and being able to operate, to offer products and services. So there's a free market element to that, clearly, and a free enterprise element, but other than that, it was never politicized. And it's a great relief to see that. Now, have you run into trouble with any companies? What particular intransigence on the part of certain elements of corporate America?
Yeah, just recently, really. I mean, there's two narratives, two very different things. One is that you've got a company like Costco. The media, the minute Costco denied a shareholder proposal, the media jumped on it immediately because we had so thoroughly demoralized all of the people on the left who have pushed this ideology that they were looking for anything, right? And it's sort of interesting because they tried to frame it as like a Costco rejection of me, which it was not. I actually didn't approach Costco. A group that is a shareholder activist group approached them with a proposal. And for history, for people who don't understand how shareholder proposals work, generally a company gives a guidance to their shareholders on how they would like them to vote on these proposals. And generally, they tell them vote no on everything. That's like 99% of the time they say vote no on everything. And the reason for that is very simple. Executives want to have executive power. And so they don't like the idea of shareholder proposals dictating how they run their business. And so they just uniformly say no. So whether or not Costco actually wanted to, keep their DEI policies or not, was not really relevant to their decision to say no to the proposal. Now, break a little bit of news here. I've actually been in conversations with Costco's executives, and so I don't think the end of the story has been written with Costco. After that all happened and the media went crazy, I made sure to make a presentation to Costco about what their policies were, about the legal liabilities involved. And, we'll have to see how that all turns out. There's still time there, but I think that, yesterday there was sort of a big movement in it, which is that 19 Republican attorneys generals came out with a letter to Costco demanding to know within 30 days if they're going to end these policies, or they need to explain themselves, explain why you're keeping these policies that create massive legal liabilities. Because I think that, to a normal person, if they look at a DEI policy, and you've got companies, this is the second part, okay? So you've got a company like JP Morgan, right? They're the other narrative because their CEO, Jamie Dimon, came out on Squawk Box on CNBC and challenged me and said, Robby Starbuck, bring it on. And so essentially I said, okay, I went to Squawk Box and I said, I'm happy to, present the evidence, and I'm challenging Jamie, come on with me. I have their DEI policies actually in front of me on this table right now. There's so many of them. It's almost hard to pick through. And I said, I'm happy to do it. So I went on Squawk Box Monday. Jamie did not come on, but the offer's open to him. And I know it's been made to him this week to come on and join me and defend these policies. Because I think even people who are Democrats, if you watch that Squawk Box interview, Sorkin, who is a host on that show, is not known for being conservative. Okay. And I think even he was like, I kind of agree with you on this stuff. Right. So if you look at this, this is an internship program specifically for Black folks, and this is one for Latinos. So what is the problem with that, right? That might be, somebody might say, what's the problem with that? They want to recruit a specific group of people. Why is that an issue? The issue is it results in this. These are numbers they tout on their website, and it says that 67% of their interns are minorities. That is impossible for that to occur naturally if you're going and you're trying to, sort of hire without any sort of racial discrimination, right? It's just not possible. We live in a country where there's no way those demographics align, right? It's just, I mean, it's ludicrous, frankly. It's almost entirely reversed. And then you look at this, they have actual quotas. So this was JP Morgan's quota saying they wanted to hire 4,000 Black apprentices, interns, and full-time analysts. They ended up hiring 4,192. So they met their quota, right? Then they prioritized diverse suppliers, but it gets worse from there. So I think an executive like Jamie does not even realize how absurd this has all gotten. This part that I'm about to describe is going to make you, I think, particularly angry, Jordan. So adults who work at JP Morgan are getting the genderbread person for training, which is just insulting and condescending, right? To try to get us to buy into gender ideology. Then you have the fact they're a platinum partner of the HRC who support child sex changes. If that's not enough, what caused the whole Bud Light fiasco, Jordan? It was Dylan Mulvaney, right? Well, guess what? Recently, JP Morgan sponsored an event for Dylan Mulvaney to go speak to children. Okay. That's the inspirational figure they're selling to kids. And then you've got gender spectrum class for managers at JP Morgan. Okay. This stuff doesn't end. And in fact, I think one of the most infuriating, they sponsor a mentorship program. And this mentorship program, they have the adults trained that if the children talk to you about sexual things, sexual identity, gender expression, any of that stuff, you can keep it secret from parents. And so, I think it's natural for a sane person of any political ideology to ask, why is a company whose job should be focused on making money doing any of this? What does it do to increase your bottom line when you're going and essentially throwing a political Molotov cocktail at half the country, more than half the country, to go off the last election results?
Well, you also brought up the issue of legal liability. Do you want to delve into that a little bit more to make it clear to everybody exactly what you mean?
Yeah, here's the irony. This is like the great irony in DEI, Jordan, is that you've got this group of people who say this is about being anti-racist, right? Well, what is the most famous era for ending racism, right? It's the civil rights era. So all the laws that came out of the civil rights era, I think that the political left has gotten confused about exactly what they mean. Apparently, they think there's an exemption in the law for white people. There is not. Those civil rights laws apply to every race. For us to embrace the tenets of DEI, we have to go and violate those laws because the tenets of DEI demand that you discriminate against white people by giving preferential treatment to other races. And I would say the other group of people who are harmed the most by it, white men are number one. They're harmed the most without question. Second group, I would say, is Asians are harmed by it, I think pretty explicitly. And then white women are a different group. They're probably, I'd say, not as close to the top of the pile in terms of who's hurt by it as people would think, because there's a lot of preferential treatment as well for white women. But white men, Asians particularly, get the short end of the stick when it comes to DEI. And so it doesn't really matter who it is, though, right? If it was black people getting the short end of the stick, if it was Latinos getting it, it would still be wrong. And so I think this
And illegal. Wrong and illegal. Right.
and it's illegal in multiple facets, by the way. It's not just like one thing. It's multiple sets of laws that are being violated. And I think the easiest way to explain it is I'm Latino. My mom was a penniless refugee, didn't even speak English when she came here. And by the way, came legally. I'm not an anchor baby or any of the stuff they're talking about now. And, you know, somebody like me, my kids have a choice. I'm married to a woman who's 100% Scottish. So my kids can check a box saying white, or they can check a box saying Latino, right? Because I'm Cuban. And we're acutely aware as parents that checking the Latino box gives them a better chance of getting into college and a better chance of getting a good job. That is wrong. It is racist. It should not exist. And frankly, that bigotry of low expectations does not just hurt the people that it's discriminating against, it hurts the minorities as well.
Yeah.
Because the competent minorities who are earning things on merit are then questioned in the workplace and treated like they're not able to do the job and they're just there because they're a DEI hire. And on the flip side of that, you're convincing a bunch of young minorities that they are not able to achieve things on their own, that they're going to need a special step up, that they're just not worthy on their own, that there's, you know, in some weird way, it almost advances the cause of saying like whites are supreme or Asians are supreme, because if not, why are you trying to artificially rig the game so that people can reach their same heights? Because that's what DEI says. It's essentially saying you need help to get to the same place as them. And I reject that as somebody who is classified under the law as a minority. I think it's ludicrous, and my kids should not get an advantage just because they can check a box.
All right, sir. Well, anything else that people need to know? Do you want to list off some of the companies that have successfully entered into a renegotiation with you and straightened themselves out on the legal and moral front?
Yeah, let's see if I can do this without forgetting any. Okay, so we'll start with the first company was Tractor Supply, then it was John Deere, then Harley Davidson. After that, I believe Ford was next. Stanley Black & Decker, DeWalt Tools, Craftsman Tools. You had after that was, I'm going to miss one here. I know I'm going to end up missing one. I'm going to go out of order now. Nissan, Ford, Toyota, McDonald's, Walmart, Meta, Target, Caterpillar, which is a massive employer, by the way. Most people don't know that. That's one of the biggest employers in the country. You've got...
Yep. Yeah. Well, we can put it in the description of the video too, just for the sake.
It's a long one. We'll have to put it in the description. I just had to write it down recently. I was like, dang, I didn't realize we had done that many, because I just...
Yeah. Well, it's impressive. Is this an accelerating process as far as you can see?
Oh, it is. Absolutely. I mean, Jordan, if you saw our files, it's crazy. I mean, it's why I have to jump from one to the next to one to the next. The minute we're done with it, I'm done with it. And we have somebody keeping track of the whistleblowers at each of these places to have long-term sort of like accountability, right? To see if anything changes. And I think there will be one company, by the way, of the 21 that we've flipped so far. I think there's one we're going to go back and report on again because they've gotten a little out of line. And I think it's important that people know that there's some semblance of accountability. We're not just going to take their word and, run away from it. We need to make sure that they're actually holding to it. But you asked if there's anything else you want to add before we leave. I think that the most important thing we could add to this is President Trump just signed an executive order that will effectively ban the mutilation of children, both chemically and physically through surgery. And I think for both you and I, that is a very important
That's
by the president.
Crucial. Yep. Thank God.
Just absolutely critical. And I think there's going to be a fight, there's going to be lawsuits, but I think our whole side is united to stop this. And the way he put it in his statement was really well worded, that this essentially was a national nightmare and it must end. This
great
catastrophe. And we'll do everything to stop it. So I think the next step is we've got to get our Congress to pass a law as well, on the books forever, that this is banned. And so there can be no question in the courts about what is allowed, what is not allowed. But this is a great step toward ending this atrocity.
Great. Well, congratulations on your further success. Keep up the great work. If there's anything I can ever do to be of aid, let me know. Sporadic updates might be part and parcel of that. It's also good to give credit where credit is due to the companies that are waking up and realizing, well, both their ethical wrongdoing and their legal liability, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? I think for a lot of people who are, even on the other side politically, if they're not totally crazy yet, I think they understand this is wrong. And I think that voices like yours and the project we're doing are making people aware of that. And I think a lot of people are shifting a lot of their values as a byproduct of seeing how the left is holding on to this and trying to keep this institutional racism in place. And so, I have hope for the future because of the wins that we're stacking up. And I think we're headed toward an incredible place.
All right, man. Keep in touch.
Thank you. Will do.
Yep. Bye-bye.